Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of adventure time as a mythos, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical, seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up. Let's begin. When we look at adventure time, it's easy to see bright colors, candy people, and cheerful nonsense. But beneath that whimsy, there's something ancient, something that hums with the quiet rhythm of a myth retold through laughter and loss. The Land of Ooo isn't just a setting, it's a world that feels like it has already lived. A world born after the end, where stories have taken root in the cracks left by catastrophe. Ooo, in many ways, is what remains after a great forgetting. Long ago, something called the Mushroom War ended the age of humans, leaving behind strange echoes, twisted landscapes, half-remembered technology, and pockets of new, impossible life. But rather than fade into ruin, this world bloomed again, shaped not by logic, but by dream and myth. You can almost imagine it. Centuries after the smoke cleared, the earth stirred in her sleep, and from the ashes rose candy people, rainicorns, talking mountains, and cosmic deities. Not as mutations, but as symbols reborn. Adventure Time presents us not with a scientific aftermath, but a mythic one, a rebirth of meaning itself. Just as ancient cultures told of floods, fires, and divine battles, Ooo feels like the next chapter in humanity's long story of beginnings and endings. The Great Mushroom War becomes our new apocalypse myth, echoing tales like Ragnarok or the fall of Atlantis. It's the idea that every ending is just a story preparing for its next voice. The difference here is that Adventure Time tells that story through innocence, absurdity, and laughter, showing that even after everything, creation can still be playful. In myth, the world is often created from something broken. The Norse spoke of Ymir's body forming the earth. The Babylonians told of Tiamat's shattered form becoming the heavens. Ooo fits beautifully into this pattern. The broken shell of the old world becomes fertile ground for new imagination. Magic seeps into matter. Science dissolves into story. It's as if the universe itself has decided to start dreaming again. Think about how Adventure Time begins. No long exposition, no explanation of what happened. We simply awaken in the middle of the dream. A boy and his dog on quiet, endless adventures. The ruins are there, half buried beneath the candy meadows and mushroom clouds, but the world no longer mourns them. Instead, it plays with what remains, like a child finding wonder in forgotten toys. That tone, light but haunting, tells us everything about what kind of myth Ooo represents. It isn't the myth of tragedy. It's the myth of endurance. A whisper of hope that even when all is lost, the heart of life finds a way to keep telling stories. The very texture of Ooo carries this duality. Forests that hum like memories, deserts littered with machines and bones, castles built from sugar and sorrow. Each corner of this world feels ancient yet alive, echoing the dream logic of myths that were never written down, only remembered. And yet, unlike the solemn myths of old, Adventure Time never insists on reverent. Its myth is playful, self-aware, and strangely comforting. The end of the world isn't treated as horror. It's treated as transformation. A cosmic composting of ideas and histories, where even the saddest ruins can bloom into something beautiful. This makes Ooo one of the most unique mythic settings in modern storytelling. It's a post-apocalyptic world that has forgotten the concept of apocalypse. A civilization built entirely on fragments of forgotten myths, some ancient, some invented. The gods still walk, but now they're shaped like breakfast foods or glowing entities who grant wishes. The heroes still rise, but their children learning how to love and lose. In this sense, Ooo becomes a living allegory for storytelling itself. Each episode, each character, is another myth sprouting from the soil of imagination. It's the human need to make sense of the unknown, wrapped in the comforting absurdity of a bedtime dream. Pool. And perhaps that's why the world of Ooo feels so deeply nostalgic. Even when it's unfamiliar, it's a myth we somehow recognize, because it's made of the same fragments all myths are made from. The fear of endings, the joy of beginnings, and the unshakable wonder of simply being alive after the world has changed forever. If you close your eyes and picture Ooo at night, you can almost feel that mythic pulse, the quiet hum of the land, the ghosts of a forgotten age blending with laughter, the moonlight glinting off candy towers and broken satellites. It's peaceful, sad but peaceful, a world that has already faced its end and learned to dream again. As we linger in that dreamlike stillness, it becomes clear that Ooo is more than just a backdrop. It's a living memory, a story that remembers itself. Every corner, every creature carries the weight of time. Yet somehow it never feels heavy. It feels curious, alive. The land itself seems to hum with the slow, pulsing breath of something ancient and forgiving. In this way, Ooo mirrors the way myths evolve over centuries. They begin as memories of real events, wars, floods, the rise and fall of empires. But they soften with time. They shed their harshness, turning into stories that teach instead of terrify. The Mushroom War might once have been humanity's final tragedy, but by the time we meet Finn and Jake, that sorrow has been transfigured. It has become play, a world of talking rainicorns and candy queens, born not out of denial, but out of survival through storytelling. That's what myths do. They reshape pain into meaning. They take what once seemed unbearable and make it bearable again through imagination. In Ooo, you can see that process everywhere. The broken skyscrapers turned into towers of gum and sugar. The once dead oceans now filled with glowing magical creatures. Even the monsters feel mythic rather than monstrous, as if the world has forgiven itself for its past by turning fear into wonder. This is why Adventure Time resonates so deeply with the rhythm of ancient myth. It doesn't simply show a world after the end, it feels like one. A civilization so far removed from the world we know that the remnants of humanity have become relics, whispered about like sacred artifacts. Old computers, forgotten ruins, and long-lost cities, each one treated with the same awe that our ancestors reserved for divine relics. And through that reverence, we see how time itself has become divine in Ooo. Thousands of years have passed since the Mushroom War, enough time for myth to take root again, for truth to dissolve into poetry. The people of Ooo no longer remember the old world as it was. They only sense its spirit, like the faint dream of a god long asleep. Think of the way Finn reacts when he stumbles upon ancient ruins or human relics. There's wonder in his eyes, but not recognition. He doesn't grieve the old world because he doesn't truly belong to it. Instead, he looks upon it like a mythic hero gazing at the bones of giants, aware that these things were important once, but unsure why. The distance creates something beautiful. It allows the audience to see how easily history becomes legend, and legend becomes myth. In this world, even the smallest things carry mythic resonance. A treehouse isn't just a home, it's a symbol of resilience, rooted in the past but reaching toward the sky. A sword isn't just a weapon. It's the heirloom of a forgotten age, an extension of identity. Finn's blade, Marceline's base, Bubblegum's science. All are modern equivalents of sacred tools once wielded by gods and heroes in old stories. And just as myths are never static, neither is Ooo. It shifts, it mutates, it breathes. Kingdoms rise and fall. Magic floods and recedes. Seasons turn in strange, uneven ways. The world seems to rewrite itself constantly, as if it's dreaming new stories to replace the ones it's forgotten. That fluidity is what gives Ooo its mythic tone. There are no fixed rules, no strict physics. Time bends, space folds, logic yields to emotion. When you wander through Ooo, you are not exploring a map. You are wandering through consciousness itself, the collective imagination of all who lived before. It's a world that remembers love, fear, loneliness, and joy, but has forgotten the language to explain them. So it speaks in symbols instead. Candy and magic, humor and melancholy, gods and ghosts. And isn't that what all great myths are? Humanity's emotions turned into landscapes, our fears given faces, our hopes made into heroes. The same can be said of Ooo. It's humanity dreaming about what it means to begin again after everything has fallen apart. This idea that the apocalypse can be gentle, that the end can give rise to something whimsical and kind, feels revolutionary. It's not a myth of punishment. It's a myth of renewal. There are no angry gods seeking vengeance, only lost souls learning how to live again. The earth is no longer ruled by humans, but by stories themselves. Each creature, each kingdom, becomes a verse in a long, meandering poem that doesn't seek an ending. And through it all, there's a kind of quiet optimism, an understanding that even if everything we know crumbles, something beautiful might still emerge. That's what makes Ooo so comforting. It's a world that has already endured its darkest hour and now drifts in the slow dawn that follows. A mythic world that teaches us, softly, that it's okay to start over. When you watch the horizon of Ooo at sunset, candy towers glowing, rivers reflecting the orange sky, it feels timeless. Like a world caught between laughter and silence, between what was lost and what was found again. And maybe in that balance, we can sense the true heart of the myth, the promise that after endings there will always be another story waiting to be told. As night settles over Ooo, the stars glimmer with an odd familiarity, as though they've watched this cycle countless times before. The rise and fall, the breaking and healing, the forgetting and remembering. The constellations themselves seem to hum with quiet memory. Perhaps they recall the world that came before, or perhaps they are simply the universe's way of keeping watch, tracing stories across the endless dark so that nothing is ever truly lost. The beauty of Ooo lies in this sense of echo. Everything feels like a continuation of something else. Even when characters act on impulse, laugh, or stumble through chaos, they are fulfilling archetypes older than time itself. This is why Adventure Time can feel both lighthearted and sacred in the same breath. Beneath the surface jokes and candy-colored skies lies a heartbeat that belongs to every myth humanity has ever told. In many creation stories, the world begins in confusion. There's chaos before order, darkness before light. In Ooo, the same rule applies, but the tone is tender instead of terrifying. The chaos of post-apocalypse has softened into dreamlike absurdity, a kind of holy nonsense that makes the unthinkable safe to imagine. It's as if the universe has decided that the only way to survive destruction is to laugh in its face, to make art, to tell stories, to fill the silence with play. There's an innocence to that, but also wisdom, because the myths we tell after the end of the world are always gentler than the ones we told before. They are born not from conquest, but from understanding. In the same way, Oo's mythology is built on compassion and curiosity. The people of Ooo are rarely cruel. They can be foolish, yes, selfish, confused, scared, but rarely hateful. It's as though the old world's violence burned itself out long ago, leaving behind a civilization that would rather build friendship than empires. And that gentleness makes Adventure Time's mythic foundation unique. It asks a quiet question. What happens when the gods go home? When the age of reason fades and magic seeps back into the cracks of the earth, what grows in their place? The answer, according to Ooo, is community. Small, fragile connections between odd little beings who learn to care for one another in a world that could have easily chosen despair. In that sense, Ooo is not a world of gods and monsters at war. It's a world of coexistence. Even when evil arises, even when darkness spreads, it's treated as part of the natural rhythm, not as something to be permanently destroyed. The Lich will always exist, just as fear and decay always exist. But so will joy, laughter, and rebirth. This balance between ruin and renewal is what defines the myth of Ooo. Consider the land's geography. The Candy Kingdom glows like a dream of innocence. The Fire Kingdom burns with primal passion. The Ice Kingdom mourns in endless stillness. These aren't just nations. They're mythic symbols, manifestations of emotion itself. Together, they form a world map made of the human psyche. Sweetness, rage, sorrow, and joy. Ooo isn't just a place outside us. It's a reflection of everything that lives within us. That idea, the world as mirror of the soul, has existed in myths since the dawn of storytelling. In the Egyptian afterlife, your heart was weighed against a feather. In Greek myths, the land itself would react to divine emotion. Ooo carries that same intimacy. When characters change, so does the land. When the balance shifts, kingdoms rise and fall. The emotional and physical worlds are woven together so seamlessly that they cannot be separated. This is what makes Ooo feel like a myth being lived rather than told. The people inside it don't know they are in a story, yet everything they do sustains it. Every act of kindness, every adventure, every song is another thread in a cosmic tapestry that keeps the dream from fading. In a way, the entire world depends on the continued act of storytelling. Without it, perhaps Ooo would dissolve, its candy trees crumbling, its rivers drying, its stars dimming to silence. That's the secret heartbeat beneath Adventure Time. The sense that existence itself is held together by imagination. It's a concept as old as humanity. Our ancestors told stories to make sense of storms, death, and stars. They believed that naming the unknown gave it meaning, that myth could keep the world from falling apart. Ooo is the embodiment of that belief. Every adventure, no matter how silly or surreal, is a quiet act of cosmic maintenance. Even characters like Ice King, tragic, comedic, endlessly repeating his mistakes, serve as mythic reminders of memory and loss. His story, like many myths, teaches through sorrow. He is both cautionary tale and symbol of redemption. In him, we see how myth transforms personal grief into eternal narrative. Through the Ice King, the myth of Ooo tells us that even madness can be sacred, that brokenness can still hold beauty. And that balance between pain and wonder is the defining quality of this world. Ooo never denies the darkness that birthed it. Instead, it embraces it gently, wrapping it in color and laughter until it feels safe to look at. That's the power of myth in its purest form. It allows us to face what we fear without being consumed by it. When we see Finn wandering across endless plains, the wind moving through fields of glowing grass, we aren't just watching a boy on an adventure. We're witnessing a human spirit moving through the ruins of history, turning memory into magic. He isn't trying to rebuild the old world. He's learning to love the new one, to accept that sometimes the end isn't something to fix, but something to live within. And as the stars continue to drift above him, Ooo feels less like a place on a map and more like a story whispered at the edge of sleep, a myth retold every night, to remind us that even after everything falls apart, there will still be light, still be laughter, still be life. In this late stretch of the story, as the candlelight of imagination flickers low, Ooo begins to resemble not just a place within a cartoon, but a living symbol of humanity's eternal dream, one that refuses to fade, even after the last fires of civilization have gone out. It is what happens when the collective soul of humankind keeps breathing long after bodies and cities are gone. There's a kind of quiet mercy in that. The world of Ooo doesn't mourn the old earth, it transforms it. It takes what was once terrifying, the end of the human age, and folds it into something gentle, playful, and oddly sacred. Like the world itself decided to tell a bedtime story to its future children, softening the sharp edges of history into something that could be loved again. And maybe that's why so many viewers feel at peace when they watch Adventure Time. Because on some level, they're not just seeing a fantasy, they're witnessing the healing of the world. Every character, every absurd joke, every tender moment between Finn and Jake is part of that restoration. Together they form a myth that teaches through laughter rather than commandments, through dreams rather than doctrine. Think about how Ooo is filled with memory, yet not ruled by it. Ancient remnants lie scattered, broken robots, collapsed highways, the bones of a lost age, but the characters walk among them without bitterness. They inhabit their inheritance without guilt. The world accepts its scars as part of its beauty. It's a myth that doesn't erase trauma but integrates it, teaching us that the past doesn't have to be forgotten to move forward. It only has to be forgiven. This is a myth of acceptance, not conquest. A myth that whispers rather than preaches. And that tone is vital because it mirrors the way myth once functioned. Not as rigid belief, but as a language for the heart. Myths were never just about gods or monsters. They were about finding meaning in the incomprehensible. Ooo does the same. Every fragment of nonsense hides a quiet truth, waiting to be seen with the right kind of eyes. For instance, consider the way nature behaves in this world. The sky often shifts between gentle hues of violet and gold, as if it's always on the verge of sunset or dawn. The forests murmur with faces, and rivers laugh softly as they bend. This isn't just whimsy, it's mythic intimacy. The universe of Ooo responds emotionally like a living being. It loves, it remembers, it forgives. It's the same animism that ancient stories carried, the belief that all things, even stones and stars, have souls. And just as those myths made the divine accessible through symbols, Ooo offers its gods not as unreachable entities, but as neighbors. Magic Man walks among mortals. Prismo naps across dimensions. Galb's presence, though incomprehensible, is never portrayed as purely evil, only vast and unknowable, like the concept of chaos itself. In this sense, Oo's mythology is deeply democratic. Every being, from the smallest candy citizen to the grandest cosmic force, belongs to the same dream. Through this lens, Adventure Time feels like humanity's subconscious, performing a ritual of renewal. The apocalypse becomes a story we tell ourselves so that we can begin again. It's as though all our old gods and fears were placed in a single dream and allowed to make peace with one another. The result isn't perfect, but it's kind, and in that kindness lies the essence of Oo's mythic power. Even the humor, silly, random, often surreal, is sacred in its own way. Ancient myths used laughter too, especially at the end of dark tales. Laughter was a form of rebirth, a reminder that creation still breathes. Oo's jokes serve that same role. They lighten the weight of the cosmic, reminding us that even when facing gods and monsters, there's always room to giggle, to sing, to play. If the myths of old were sung around firelight, then Oo's stories are whispered under the glow of neon stars and bioluminescent candy clouds. But the spirit is the same. They comfort the living, honor the dead, and keep the mystery alive. The Land of Ooo is our collective bonfire in the dark, a place where the imagination gathers to remember how to dream. So when we think of Adventure Time as a myth, it becomes more than a story about a boy and his dog. It becomes a reflection of the human condition itself, the endless cycle of loss and creation, memory and renewal. Finn, Jake, Marceline, Bubblegum, they're all pieces of us, fragments of human nature scattered across a re-enchanted earth. Their adventures remind us that life, even when strange or painful, is still sacred. And in that sacred strangeness, Ooo finds its eternity, not in temples or prophecy, but in moments of connection, a song shared under a pink twilight, a laugh after danger, a friendship that endures beyond time. That's the myth that Ooo tells, the myth of survival through softness, through curiosity, through love. As the night deepens, you can imagine the world of Ooo sleeping, its candy forest glowing faintly under starlight, its rivers whispering lullabies to forgotten cities. It's not a paradise. It's not a warning. It's something in between. A gentle reminder that even at the end of all things, the universe still dreams. And in that dream, humanity lingers, not as conquerors or ghosts, but as storytellers, whispering myths into the quiet, hoping that someone somewhere will still be listening. If Ooo is the dream of a world that refused to die, then Finn the human is the dreamer who walks within it, the heartbeat that gives this strange new mythology its warmth and shape. He is, in every sense, the last mortal dream, a boy who believes in heroism long after the world has forgotten what that means. When we first meet Finn, he's not a chosen one, not a prince, not even someone with a destiny. He's just a kid in a world that doesn't remember his kind. And that, in itself, is mythic. Heroes rarely come from perfect worlds. They rise from forgotten places, carrying the spark of what used to be. Finn carries that spark for all of humanity, the last echo of mortal courage, still trying to make sense of a divine, chaotic landscape. In him, we see the shape of countless ancient heroes reborn in a new skin. Like Gilgamesh, he searches for meaning in a world where gods and monsters blur together. Like Odysseus, he travels endlessly, not just across lands, but through his own growing heart. And like so many mythic figures before him, he wrestles with the fragile balance between human emotion and cosmic truth. Yet what makes Finn truly extraordinary is not his power, but his sincerity. He is brave, yes, but also deeply, achingly human. He cries, he doubts, he gets angry and confused. He makes mistakes, and that makes him more than a mythic archetype. It makes him the pulse of one. In a world of magic and immortals, Finn's mortality becomes his greatest strength. He will die one day, but that very impermanence makes his kindness and courage sacred. His world doesn't need saving in the traditional sense. Ooo will go on existing in some form, no matter what he does. The monsters he fights are often temporary, reappearing in new forms, new guises, new metaphors. What Finn is truly fighting for is meaning itself. He's trying to prove that even a small, mortal act of goodness matters in an infinite, absurd universe. That search defines his journey. At first, Finn imagines heroism as something simple. Fight bad guys, rescue princesses, keep people safe. But as his adventures unfold, the meaning of heroism changes. It becomes quieter, gentler, sometimes painful. He learns that not every villain can be defeated. Not every friend can be saved. Not every ending is happy. Yet even in those moments, he never loses the desire to do what's right. In that way, Finn's story mirrors the evolution of myth itself. Ancient heroes often began as conquerors, slayers of beasts, founders of kingdoms. But as myths matured, the heroes changed. They became seekers of wisdom, wanderers on inner journeys. Finn follows that same path. His strength matters less than his compassion. His sword is only as powerful as his empathy allows it to be. You can feel this transformation as the seasons progress. The boy who once shouted, "mathematical," while diving into danger grows quieter, more introspective. He begins to see the world as layered, complex, often bittersweet. The heroic certainty of youth gives way to a deeper, more adult understanding, that there are no final victories, only moments of grace. Yet even as he matures, Finn never loses his wonder. That is the miracle of him. He keeps the lightness of a child's heart, even as he faces the weight of the universe. In this, he becomes something rare, a hero who does not outgrow innocence, but refines it. His goodness isn't naive, it's chosen, over and over again, even when the world gives him every reason to stop believing. And perhaps that's why the world of Ooo responds to him the way it does. Nature bends gently around him. Beasts hesitate before him. Even cosmic entities like Prismo and the Lich acknowledge his existence as something meaningful. Finn represents the last thread connecting Ooo to its human origin story. In a landscape full of gods, he is the reminder that the human spirit, small, curious, stubborn, still matters. But there's something haunting in that, too. Finn is the last human for most of the series, the final echo of a vanished species. He carries the loneliness of that truth quietly. Sometimes it flickers in his eyes when he looks out over empty plains or forgotten ruins. He is surrounded by friends, yet set apart by fate. That solitude is not punishment. It's the mythic isolation of every hero who walks between worlds. Because at its core, Adventure Time is not just the story of magic and monsters. It's the story of what it means to be human when humanity itself has become a myth. And in that myth, Finn stands as its living memory, the mortal dream walking through a world of gods and ghosts. When you think about it, Finn's very presence in Ooo is almost impossible. An echo that should not exist, and yet does. A remnant of a forgotten world, born into one made of miracles and strangeness. That contradiction is what gives him depth. He is both ancient and new, both survivor and child. His humanity is an inheritance from an age long gone, but also a promise, a reminder that something soft and kind has endured through all the cosmic madness. And he carries that inheritance unknowingly. Finn doesn't walk the land proclaiming himself the last human. He simply is, existing naturally among beings who should have replaced him long ago. That quiet acceptance of his place in Ooo gives him a mythic humility. Unlike heroes of legend who claim divine right or noble blood, Finn's strength lies in his ordinariness. He is brave without grandeur, wise without pride, wounded without despair. This humility gives his actions more weight than any prophecy could. When he saves someone, it isn't destiny, it's empathy. When he stands against evil, it isn't to prove power, it's to protect joy. In that sense, Finn's heroism feels deeply spiritual. He embodies the most ancient ideal of the human spirit, to keep trying, even when the world no longer expects it of you. There's a moment that captures this essence beautifully, the way he always reaches out to those who seem beyond saving. Think of his compassion towards the Ice King, whose madness has made him a tragic figure rather than a villain. Finn doesn't destroy him, even when he has the chance. Instead, he seeks to understand. He wants to know what turned this lonely old man into the shell he's become. A desire to see the heart behind the horror, That's the kind of heroism that transcends the sword. In older myths, compassion was often the final lesson heroes had to learn. Achilles had to understand the grief of Priam. Gilgamesh had to accept mortality. Even the Buddha, in his mythic journey, found enlightenment through empathy rather than conquest. Finn walks that same quiet road. His victories aren't carved into stone. They're carried in memory, in the lives he touches. What's remarkable about Finn's journey is how it unfolds across time without losing its emotional continuity. We see him grow, falter, and rise again, each stage of life reshaping the idea of what being a hero means. As a child, heroism is adventure, saving princesses, fighting monsters. As a teenager, it becomes a search for identity and love. And as he matures, it becomes reflection, the understanding that the world doesn't need saving, it just needs care. That slow evolution mirrors the way myths mature within us. As children, we love the spectacle, the dragons, the quests, the shining swords. But as we grow, we begin to hear the quieter echoes beneath those stories, the lessons about patience, loss, and compassion. Finn's story invites us to make that same transition, to see heroism not as a battle cry, but as a lullaby. Even his relationship with Jake reflects that transformation. Jake begins as his guardian, a companion who embodies wisdom disguised as laziness. Over time, their roles blur. Finn learns from Jake, but Jake also learns from Finn about innocence, about human fragility, about the simple beauty of caring without reason. Their bond becomes one of the great emotional threads in Adventure Time's mythos, the eternal dance between the seeker and the sage. And through this bond, Finn becomes a bridge. He connects the mortal and the divine, the fleeting and the eternal. When he laughs, gods take notice. When he cries, the land seems to ache with him. In mythic terms, that makes him a liminal figure, a being who walks between realms, carrying understanding from one side to the other. In him, the divine remembers its humanity, and the human touches the divine. That liminality is not without pain. Finn's human heart often suffers under the weight of a world that doesn't quite fit him. He loves deeply, but many of his loves are unreachable. Marceline's immortal loneliness, Bubblegum's responsibilities, Flame Princess's volatile nature. These are not simple romances, they're allegories. Each love tests a different part of his soul, teaching him something essential about connection and detachment. And through each heartbreak he grows, not in bitterness, but in depth. Finn learns that love, in a mythic sense, isn't always about possession. It's about understanding. It's the act of seeing something clearly, even if it can never be yours. That lesson transforms him from a boy who wants to save everyone into a man who simply wants everyone to be okay. In that transformation, Finn becomes the purest kind of hero, the one who seeks no reward, who fights no prophecy, who simply tries to bring a little more light into the darkness. His myth is quiet, but enduring. It tells us that in a universe filled with gods, chaos, and eternity, the most sacred thing may still be the kindness of a mortal heart that refuses to stop caring. There's a certain stillness that surrounds Finn when you look at his story as a myth. It's the same stillness that lingers in old bedtime tales, the kind that feel like they've been told for centuries, passed from one dreamer to the next. Finn's legend begins as a song of adventure, but ends as something almost sacred, a remembrance of what it means to be human in a world that has forgotten the word human. In mythic language, he is the last dreamer of the old world. His adventures are not just about defeating evil, they are acts of remembering, of keeping the pulse of the human spirit alive in a place that no longer needs it. Every time he rushes into danger, it is as though he's saying to the universe, "We were here once, and we still matter." That's what makes Finn's bravery so moving. It's not loud, not glorious, but quiet and persistent, like the heartbeat of a forgotten age. Ooo, as a world, doesn't always understand him. The candy people adore him, but they see him as an oddity, someone delightfully old-fashioned, perhaps a little naive. The wizards view him as a curiosity, a creature from a simpler time. Even beings like the cosmic owl, or Prismo, seem to regard him as something almost miraculous, a mortal who continues to care in a world of abstraction. Finn's humanity becomes the mirror through which gods and monsters alike rediscover emotion. You can see this reflection most clearly in his encounters with the divine. Prismo, for example, offers Finn the chance to live infinite lives, to explore every possibility. And Finn accepts, not out of greed, but out of wonder. Yet after the experience, he returns, because what he truly values isn't endless life, but the meaning within a single one. That understanding turns him from a hero into a philosopher. His myth isn't about conquering death, but embracing it. In the language of myth, this makes Finn a mortal hero touched by eternity. Figures like this appear throughout ancient traditions, mortals who brushed the divine and returned wiser. Think of Odysseus speaking with the dead, or Arjuna conversing with the god Krishna. Finn walks that same quiet road, guided not by divine command, but by curiosity and empathy. Each encounter, whether with death himself or the dreamscape, or the endless halls of time, teaches him something about the balance between the infinite and the finite. And what's remarkable is how gentle these lessons are. Adventure Time never punishes Finn for his humanity. It allows him to grow within it. His mistakes are treated not as sins, but as steps in an eternal unfolding. When he lashes out, when he grieves, when he questions his purpose, the world doesn't strike him down. It listens. It bends slightly, like a vast dream acknowledging its own sleeper. That, too, is part of the mythos. The idea that the universe is not cruel, but quietly responsive to those who love it. As Finn ages, the tone of his story shifts, just as old myths do when their heroes grow weary. The battles become quieter. The meaning moves inward. His sword, the weapon that once defined him, starts to fade from importance. In its place comes reflection. He begins to notice the gentle things, a breeze through the grass, a friend's laughter, the silence after a long day's quest. It's as if the world itself begins to whisper to him, showing that the truest adventure isn't found in conquest, but in peace. When he finally lays down his weapon and accepts the flow of life as it is, Finn becomes a mythic symbol of acceptance. This is the part of the story where the hero becomes legend, not through grand deeds, but through understanding. He no longer fights to change the world. He walks within it, grateful and awake. That moment of calm is what separates heroes from gods. Gods control, but heroes understand. And Finn, the last mortal dream, becomes a bridge of empathy that even the cosmos seems to honor. There's a kind of melancholy in that realization, because to reach that peace, Finn has to lose the fire that once drove him. But perhaps that's what all myths eventually teach us, that the journey from passion to peace is not a loss. It's the natural rhythm of being alive. The boy who once ran across the fields of Ooo with a shining sword eventually becomes a man who can sit beneath the same stars, smiling, content to simply be. That is his victory, and it's one every mortal heart can share. In mythic language, this would be called the gentle apotheosis, the transformation of a human into something greater, not through divine favor, but through deep understanding. Finn doesn't ascend to heaven or become a god. He becomes something even rarer, a mortal who has made peace with the infinite. His legend, then, isn't a tale of power. It's a lullaby about acceptance. Even his dreams reflect this shift. The cosmic dreams that once pulled him into strange visions become softer, more introspective. He begins to meet versions of himself, not as warnings, but as reflections. Each one shows him a different possibility, a different life he could have lived. And instead of longing for them, he smiles, because he finally understands that each life, no matter how brief, carries the same sacred spark. Finn's myth, in the end, is the myth of all humanity, the story of a fragile being daring to love a world that's too vast to understand. He teaches us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to keep caring despite it. That love, even when it fades, leaves behind warmth. And that sometimes the greatest act of heroism is learning how to rest beneath the stars, content in knowing you've done your part. And so, as the myth of Finn unfolds toward its quiet end, we begin to see him less as a warrior and more as a reflection of the dream itself, the last flicker of human wonder, wandering through a world that has already moved on. In this sense, he is not just the hero within the myth of Ooo, he is the myth's dreamer, its living heartbeat. Every choice he makes and every lesson he learns ripples gently through that surreal land like a remembered story whispered in sleep. Finn's story mirrors the ancient pattern of the hero's journey, but softened, as if wrapped in moonlight. The call to adventure came to him in the form of joy and curiosity, not tragedy. His descent into darkness, the moments of heartbreak, loneliness, and failure, never stripped him of hope. And his return, his awakening, is not triumphant or loud, but tender. Instead of claiming the throne or the treasure, Finn returns to himself wiser, quieter, still human. That gentleness is what makes him stand apart from the mythic heroes who came before him. There is also something deeply cyclical in Finn's existence, a rhythm that echoes through time. He has lived and died, dreamed and awakened, across timelines, reincarnations, and alternate worlds. Each time, his essence remains the same kind, curious, brave, and hopeful. That persistence feels sacred, as if the universe itself cherishes his pattern and keeps rewriting him into existence. In mythology, this is the sign of an eternal archetype, a figure so deeply woven into the dream of creation that it cannot fade, only change form. We see this idea most clearly in the finale when Finn faces the possibility of death, not with fear, but with calm acceptance. Standing beside Jake, surrounded by chaos and cosmic collapse, he doesn't beg for life. He listens, he breathes, and he trusts. In that moment, he embodies something that mythic heroes rarely reach: contentment. The storm of existence swirls around him, but he remains still, a tiny, glowing center of peace. That stillness is the heart of his myth, the final echo of a human dream that has learned to rest. Even his relationships, so tangled and imperfect, contribute to his symbolic weight. Marceline and Bubblegum, Flame Princess. Each represents an aspect of human emotion, a fragment of what it means to love in an impermanent world. With Marceline, Finn touches the depth of memory and melancholy, learning that time cannot erase care. With Bubblegum, he confronts reason and restraint, discovering that even intellect carries longing. And with Flame Princess, he faces volatility, the fire of passion that both creates and destroys. These loves shape him like ancient trials, softening his heart rather than hardening it. In old myths, such trials were meant to purify the hero, to strip away illusions until only truth remained. And what truth does Finn discover? That there is no final victory, no eternal kingdom, no divine perfection waiting beyond the quest. There is only the moment, the laughter of a friend, the warmth of sunlight on a ruined field, the feeling of being alive in a universe that continues to change. That realization transforms him from a seeker of glory into a keeper of peace. Even the Land of Ooo responds to this transformation. As Finn matures, Ooo itself seems to calm. The once chaotic landscape, a patchwork of candy and magic and nuclear ghosts, settles into something almost serene. It's as if the world mirrors Finn's growth, learning gentleness alongside him. This shared evolution between hero and world gives his myth an unusually intimate rhythm. In most legends, the world changes the hero. In Adventure Time, the hero's quiet kindness changes the world. That influence reaches beyond his own lifetime, too. The younger generations like Shermie and Beth inherit not just his adventures, but his attitude. They don't worship him as a god or king. They tell his story as if it were a comforting dream, a myth meant to be retold by firesides or beneath the stars. In that retelling, Finn becomes timeless not through divinity, but through affection. His name is not a command, but a lullaby. This is what makes Adventure Time feel like an ancient myth reborn. It's not about immortality in the literal sense. It's about the persistence of feeling, of care, of curiosity. Finn's legend doesn't demand temples or prayers. It lives quietly in the hearts of those who still wonder, who still believe in the small miracles of existence. In him, the spirit of adventure becomes indistinguishable from the act of dreaming itself. When seen through that lens, Finn the human becomes more than just the last mortal hero. He becomes the dream of humanity, the memory of what we once were and the hope of what we might still be, sleeping softly in the folds of time. He reminds us that myths are not about the gods who shaped the world, but about the mortals who gave it meaning. And as long as someone remembers his name, tells his story, or feels inspired to care for another soul, his myth endures. That is Finn's immortality, not as a warrior and not as a savior, but as a dream that refuses to fade. A story that continues to hum quietly in the background of existence, long after the music has stopped. The last mortal dream, sleeping peacefully in the heart of Ooo, where the stars still whisper of his kindness. Let's keep drifting through our quiet journey into the mythic heart of Ooo. In this part of our bedtime story, we turn our gaze toward one of the most deceptively profound figures in Adventure Time, Jake the dog. To many, Jake might seem like comic relief, the laid-back companion, the funny, stretchy dog who loves to nap and play the viola. But beneath that easygoing warmth lies something much older, something that resonates with the oldest stories humanity has ever told. In the myth of Ooo, Jake isn't just a friend or sidekick. He is the trickster, the sacred fool who dances between chaos and wisdom, embodying both mischief and enlightenment. The archetype of the trickster is one of the oldest symbols in myth. From Loki to Hermes, from Coyote to Anansi, the trickster has always been the figure who breaks rules to reveal deeper truths. He laughs at the seriousness of gods and heroes alike, showing that even in the grand machinery of destiny, there must always be room for laughter. Jake fits this role perfectly. He moves through life with a kind of unshakable calm, a gentle humor that disarms even the darkest situations. While Finn charges forward with youthful purpose, Jake glides through the same storms with a smile and a stretch. But this isn't laziness. It's wisdom disguised as play. Jake understands something fundamental about the world that even the most cosmic beings struggle to grasp. That existence, at its core, is a kind of dream, and that the only way to live it fully is to flow with it. In this sense, Jake is not the opposite of Finn, but his spiritual counterbalance. Finn strives, Jake accepts. Finn questions, Jake trusts. Together they form a sacred duality, action and stillness, will and surrender. If Finn is the mythic hero, then Jake is the divine jester, who reminds the hero that the universe is not a machine to conquer, but a song to be danced to. He stretches, morphs, and transforms, not just in body, but in spirit. That ability to shift shapes is deeply symbolic. In myths across the world, shapeshifters represent adaptability, freedom, and the truth that identity is never fixed. Jake's transformations are playful on the surface, but beneath them lies an ancient lesson, that wisdom is not rigidity, but flexibility, the ability to bend without breaking. And Jake bends beautifully. He bends through danger, through heartbreak, through cosmic confusion. When the world around him grows too strange or frightening, he simply stretches wider. That image of a being who can expand himself to hold more of the world feels almost divine. It's as if Jake's powers are a metaphor for spiritual openness, for the heart that can make room for chaos without being consumed by it. Jake's humor, too, holds a kind of sacred power. In many spiritual traditions, the fool is not a lesser figure, but a holy one, the only being who can mock the divine and get away with it. Humor, in this sense, is liberation. It frees the soul from the heavy illusion of control. When Jake laughs in the face of danger or teases the solemn gods of Ooo, he isn't being disrespectful. He's reminding them that they, too, are part of the dream. There's a subtle irony here. In the mythos of Ooo, beings like the cosmic owl, the Lich, or even Prismo seem to wield unimaginable power. But it is Jake, the lazy dog who naps under trees, who might understand existence most truthfully. His simplicity is not ignorance, it's transcendence. He doesn't need to analyze the nature of reality because he lives it naturally without resistance. To him, everything is already okay. That is his enlightenment. When you look closely, Jake's philosophy resembles that of Zen monks or Taoist sages, those who find peace not by controlling the flow of life, but by becoming one with it. His advice often sounds silly at first, but it always points toward acceptance. When Finn struggles with heartbreak or identity, Jake never offers rigid solutions. He simply says something like, "Just let it be, dude," or "You're overthinking it, man." But those lines, simple as they sound, are profound. They carry the same quiet truth as the teachings of Lao Tzu, that the world is already in balance, if only we stop fighting it. In this way, Jake stands at the intersection of wisdom and play a bridge between the mundane and the divine. The sacred fool has always had that power. In myths, he is the only one who can speak to gods without fear, the only one who can reveal truth through laughter. He is both child and sage, both ignorant and all-knowing. And in Adventure Time, Jake holds that same paradox effortlessly. He doesn't need prophecy or ritual to touch the divine. He just lives. He cooks breakfast, naps in the sunlight, and plays tunes while the universe unfolds around him, content to be part of the cosmic joke, rather than the one trying to solve it. In many ways, Jake represents the soul of Ooo more purely than anyone else. He is made of magic, born of something wild and mysterious, yet he never seeks to dominate that power. Instead, he treats it with the same casual affection he gives to everything else. His existence says, you can be miraculous without being serious. And that might be the most comforting lesson in all of Adventure Time's mythology, that even in a world built from ruins and magic, laughter can still be holy. Jake's very birth feels mythic when you look at it closely. The child of a shape-shifting creature, born from something wild and otherworldly, yet destined to live among mortals as though nothing were strange about him at all. That paradox, the divine disguised as the ordinary, is at the heart of every trickster myth. Jake walks through Ooo as both participant and observer, aware in his own way that reality is more flexible than most people dare to believe. He never questions his powers, never wonders why he can stretch his body to impossible limits or sense the pulse of things unseen. He accepts it as simply what is, and that calm acceptance is what makes him sacred. In most myths, gods and heroes struggle endlessly with their own divinity, trying to understand or justify it. Jake never does. His comfort with mystery is what gives him peace. He doesn't need answers to believe that everything will be all right. That faith becomes a guiding light for Finn. Where Finn sees the world as something to fix, Jake sees it as something to flow with. One acts, the other accepts. Together, they form a complete mythology of human experience, the striving and the surrender, the doing and the being. Every time Finn charges into a storm, Jake is the voice reminding him that sometimes it's okay to let the wind carry you instead of fighting it. This dynamic is what makes Jake's wisdom so hard to see at first glance. He rarely speaks in profound language, never dresses his insights in poetry. Instead, he couches them in jokes, laziness, or food. But behind every laugh lies a deep stillness. When he tells Finn to chill, he isn't avoiding the problem. He's offering the most ancient advice in the world, to trust in the unfolding of things. That attitude, that serene looseness, connects him with the cosmic. You can feel it in his relationship with Prismo, the wishmaster who lives in the timeless space of dreams. Jake's visits there are almost casual, two old friends hanging out, chatting about existence like it's no big deal. But what's quietly beautiful about those scenes is how Jake fits perfectly in both worlds. He's equally at home lounging on Prismo's couch in the dimension between realities as he is cooking breakfast in the tree fort. That is the mark of the sacred fool, a being who can move between heaven and earth, the mortal and the divine, without changing himself. The fool's gift in myth is ease. He walks where others tremble. He laughs where others pray. Not because he doesn't care, but because he understands that even chaos has purpose. Jake carries that ease into every part of his life. When death approaches, he greets it like an old friend. When the world ends and begins again, he treats it like the tide, something natural, something to flow with rather than fear. And yet Jake is not detached in the cold way of a god. His love is deeply human. He loves Lady Rainicorn, loves his children, loves his brother, his domestic warmth, his laughter, his endless appetite for simple pleasures, all of these root his cosmic wisdom in the most ordinary joys. That balance is what keeps him from drifting into apathy. The Trickster, after all, is not meant to escape the world, but to remind it of its beauty. Even his flaws, the laziness, the occasional selfishness, are part of the archetype. The sacred fool is never perfect. He stumbles, forgets, oversleeps. But those imperfections make his wisdom real. They remind us that enlightenment doesn't require perfection, only presence. Jake never pretends to be more than he is, and in that honesty lies a deeper truth, that divinity can exist within imperfection. Let's just say, when you see him lying under a tree, stretching lazily while the sun filters through the leaves, you can almost imagine him as an ancient spirit in disguise. The way he hums to himself, half asleep, half awake, it feels like the rhythm of the universe itself breathing through him. That's what the fool represents at his core. The idea that creation isn't something to be understood or conquered, but something to enjoy. There's something almost meditative about Jake's entire presence in the story. In a world built on post-apocalyptic chaos and surreal magic, he radiates calm. His laughter is like a protective charm, diffusing tension wherever it goes. When others panic, he smiles. When others grieve, he listens. He doesn't fix things. He makes them lighter. That's the true miracle of the fool. He turns the unbearable into the bearable simply by refusing to take despair too seriously. And yet, within that laughter, there's a quiet awareness of impermanence. Jake knows that everything, every joy, every life must pass. But rather than mourn it, he celebrates it. He finds peace, not in escaping mortality, but in savoring it. This, too, makes him mythic. In a world where even gods cling to eternity, Jake teaches the holiness of transience. The stretch always returns to rest. The day always folds into night. That rhythm, he seems to say, is the magic. There's a particular tenderness in the way Jake lives his life, a kind of unspoken reverence beneath the jokes and naps. He never preaches or explains, yet his actions often reveal a cosmic patience that even the wisest beings in Ooo seem to lack. When things fall apart, Jake doesn't rush to rebuild them. He lets them be. When Finn spirals into confusion or pain, Jake doesn't drown him in advice. He sits quietly beside him, waiting for the storm to pass. That patience is his true magic. It's the same magic that ancient tricksters carried, the understanding that sometimes the world fixes itself if you just give it time. Jake's connection to the mystical feels effortless because, in truth, he is part of it. He was born from a mysterious creature that might be divine, demonic, or simply something beyond definition. That origin gives him a thread that reaches into the unknown. But unlike others who search desperately for meaning, Jake never tries to trace it. He doesn't need to. He's content to live between answers, embracing uncertainty as naturally as he breathes. That comfort with mystery is the heart of his archetype. In the oldest myths, the fool often appears when a story grows too heavy with order, when gods become too strict, when heroes become too proud. The fool arrives to loosen the fabric, to laugh, to trip over sacred rules, to remind everyone that perfection isn't the point. Jake fulfills this exact role in Ooo. While Finn represents effort, courage, and purpose, Jake brings balance through surrender, humor, and ease. Together they prevent the story from collapsing under its own seriousness. Their friendship is the myth's breath, the balance between striving and stillness, between the human and the divine. There's a purity to that balance. Jake never tries to be anyone else. He doesn't seek greatness, enlightenment, or eternal fame. His wisdom lies in being content. In that sense, he represents the ideal that so many spiritual traditions hint at but rarely embody, that peace isn't found by ascending mountains or fighting monsters, but by simply being at ease in one's own skin. He finds joy in breakfast, in music, in the sunlight through the window. These are small things, yet they hold the weight of eternity when seen through Jake's eyes. When you imagine him sitting on the porch of the tree fort, legs stretched out impossibly long, watching the clouds drift by, it feels like an image straight from myth. The world could be ending or beginning again, and Jake would still find something funny about it. That perspective doesn't come from apathy. It comes from understanding. The fool laughs not because he doesn't care, but because he sees that everything, even sorrow, belongs to the same sacred pattern. This is why Jake's eventual death feels less like tragedy and more like fulfillment. When the time comes, he doesn't resist. He treats death like another nap, another dream to wander through. In that moment, he becomes something archetypal, the eternal fool who knows that life and death are two sides of the same joke. There's something profoundly beautiful about that acceptance. In many mythologies, the trickster cannot die because his essence is renewal itself. And in Adventure Time, Jake's presence lingers even after he's gone, felt in the laughter and calm he left behind. Finn's journey after Jake's passing becomes almost devotional. He carries Jake's spirit in every quiet smile, every moment of surrender. It's as if Jake's lesson to flow, to trust, to lighten becomes the final chapter of Finn's myth. And through that, Jake's role as the sacred fool is complete. He has passed on not just friendship, but a philosophy. In that way, Jake embodies something universal, Across cultures and ages, the trickster's purpose is never destruction, it's transformation. He unsettles the rigid, dissolves the serious, and lets new life flow in. That's exactly what Jake does for Ooo. When chaos overwhelms the world, his laughter resets it. When heroes tire under the weight of meaning, his silliness restores balance. He is the pulse of renewal, the breath of levity that keeps the dream alive. What makes him so quietly divine is that he doesn't seem to know it. Jake never claims wisdom, never demands reverence, yet the universe bends toward his way of being. Even gods seem to relax in his presence, his friendship with Prismo, his ease among beings that exist outside time. These encounters show that the cosmic and the simple aren't opposites. They coexist. Through Jake, Adventure Time reminds us that enlightenment doesn't always come through thunder or revelation. Sometimes it's just a dog lying in the sun, smiling at nothing in particular, perfectly at peace. Oh, in that smile lives the heart of the trickster's myth, the reminder that laughter is sacred, that play is divine, and that the universe, no matter how strange or tragic, is still a place meant to be loved. Jake's story tells us that it's okay not to understand everything, that not knowing can be its own kind of wisdom. The sacred fool doesn't seek to master the dream, he just enjoys it. And in doing so, he becomes one with it. If you look closely, the universe of Ooo seems to move in rhythm with Jake's laughter. The grass sways in a gentle syncopation when he strums his viola. The wind seems softer around him, like the world itself is in on the joke. Even the most frightening things, eldritch beings, cursed relics, the shadow of the Mushroom War, lose their edge in his company. Because Jake brings a rare kind of magic. He doesn't fight darkness, he befriends it. He plays with it, reshaping fear into familiarity. That is the trickster's deepest power, to turn the unknown into something we can live with. This ability to make peace with the strange is what makes Jake more than comic relief. He's a bridge between the mortal and the cosmic, the real and the absurd, the serious and the silly. His very nature blurs boundaries, which is what all true tricksters do. They are liminal beings standing at thresholds, reminding us that the world isn't divided by hard lines, but woven in gradients and spirals. Jake's stretchy body is a literal embodiment of that. He can become anything, stretch anywhere, fit into any form. His form is fluid because his spirit is fluid. And when we look at Jake in that symbolic way, he begins to resemble the tricksters of old beings like Hermes, Loki, and the Monkey King. Each of them existed at the crossroads between heaven and earth, guiding messages between worlds, stirring chaos when things grew too still. Yet Jake's chaos is soft. He doesn't break rules to harm. He bends them to help. His mischief heals more often than it hurts. When he lies, it's rarely cruel. When he tricks, it's often to show someone what they couldn't see on their own. There's a reason Finn and Jake's adventures so often start with silliness and end in quiet insight. The trickster's path is circular, a dance, not a straight line. Every episode where Jake jokes his way through a dangerous situation teaches a small parable, that wisdom and absurdity aren't opposites, but mirrors. To laugh in the face of danger isn't ignorance. It's courage of another kind. The courage to accept life's mystery instead of mastering it. And yet, despite all his easygoing nature, Jake's role carries immense weight in the myth of Ooo, because in a world born from apocalypse, where ancient sorrow hums beneath every cheerful melody, Jake is the force that keeps despair from swallowing everything. When the ruins of the old world whisper too loudly, when the past threatens to define the future, Jake diffuses it with joy. It's his quiet rebellion against the gravity of history. Laughter in Ooo becomes a sacred act of resistance. Imagine for a moment the world without Jake. The tree fort would feel emptier, quieter, heavier. Finn's courage would still burn bright, but it might grow brittle, sharp-edged without Jake's warmth to round it. The land itself might lose some of its softness, because Jake isn't just Finn's friend, he's Oo's heartbeat. His songs, his naps, his laughter, they echo across the landscape like little enchantments, keeping the myth alive in balance. In the end, when Jake transcends the physical world and joins the stars, the myth completes its cycle. He returns to the realm of the cosmic beings, but not as one of them, as himself unchanged. The fool steps beyond death, still smiling, his belly still full, his heart still light. And that's the most profound part of his mythic pattern. He doesn't evolve into something more. He proves that he already was enough. That's a quiet truth hidden in many ancient stories. The trickster never strives to be divine. He simply reveals that divinity was always ordinary. Every loaf of bread, every lazy afternoon, every shared laugh, all of it's sacred, if only you can see it that way. Jake lives that truth so naturally that even the gods around him seem humbled. They bend their heads when he walks in, not because he demands reverence, but because his ease reveals how hard they've made things for themselves. Finn's tears in Together Again aren't just for loss, they're for understanding. He realizes, finally, what Jake had been teaching him all along, that the journey doesn't end in triumph, but in acceptance, that love and laughter outlast even the apocalypse. When Finn and Jake reunite, it feels less like resurrection and more like the universe remembering its own laughter. So, in the grand mythos of Adventure Time, Jake stands as both the sacred fool and the quiet sage. His jokes are mantras. His naps are meditations. His songs are prayers to the simple joy of being alive. He shows us that, even in a broken world, meaning doesn't have to be found, it can be felt. If Finn is the last mortal dreamer, Jake is the dream's soft laughter echoing through the cosmos. Together they form the heart of Oo's myth, a reminder that the end of the world doesn't mean the end of wonder, and that sometimes the wisest thing a hero can do is take a nap and smile at the stars. And as the story of Jake fades into quiet memory, we're left with that lingering warmth, the kind that comes after laughter, when the room falls still and you realize the silence itself is smiling back. Tonight we rise gently beyond the mortal and the mundane, drifting upward into the quiet skies where the gods and monsters of Adventure Time dream. We've walked the plains of Ooo and followed the footsteps of Finn and Jake, but now it's time to lift the veil, to step into the strange, endless realm where creation itself has a face and a voice. This is the cosmic court of Adventure Time, where laughter and silence hold equal power, and where every star seems to pulse with divine memory. When we talk about gods in Ooo, we aren't referring to beings who demand worship or thunder from the clouds. The gods of this world feel like dreamers, enormous, abstract presences who exist just slightly out of reach, like reflections rippling on still water. They are not omnipotent, but they are ancient, and they watch with the calm of beings who have seen the world end more than once. Each of them seems to embody a fundamental truth of existence: time, chaos, life, death, and the quiet space between them. One of the most fascinating of these is Prismo, the Wishmaster. He sits in his timeless room, a pink, glowing figure lounging on his bed, watching infinite realities play out like television channels. At first glance, he seems playful, even lazy, but underneath that warmth lies something profound, the awareness of infinity. He is both divine and domestic, powerful yet gentle. In mythic terms, Prismo is the god of possibility, the patron of dreams and second chances. His realm doesn't feel like a throne room. It feels like a sanctuary, a place where the rules of the universe bend to kindness. And yet, For all his comfort and humor, there's a melancholy to Prismo. Like many deities in ancient myths, his power comes with loneliness. His existence depends on the slumber of another being, the cosmic being who dreams him into life. It's a delicate balance, a god who exists only because another dreams, a reminder that even the divine are fragile, dependent on forces beyond their control. This mirrors the old stories of gods born from thought, from song, from the breath of the cosmos itself. Prismo is a reflection of that idea that creation and dreaming are one and the same act. Around him, the pantheon of Ooo stretches wide and strange. There's death, quiet and almost courteous, a skeletal figure with a gentle, dry wit. Unlike the grim reapers of darker myths, death in Adventure Time feels inevitable, but not cruel. He does not hunt. He simply waits. He represents not judgment, but return the soft exhale after the long dream of living. In the mythic sense, death is one of the most balanced gods of the universe, a reminder that endings are simply transformations. Then there's the cosmic owl, who glides through the dreams of mortals and gods alike. He is the messenger, the omen, the silent witness. His presence echoes the archetype of the prophetic spirit, the one who doesn't cause fate, but reveals it. In mythology, owls often represent hidden knowledge, intuition, and the thin veil between the waking and the dream. The cosmic owl embodies that perfectly. He doesn't intervene, but his gaze changes those who encounter him. Seeing him is a kind of awakening, or sometimes a quiet doom. And beyond even these, there are forces more abstract still beings like Orgalor, who fell from the stars, and Galb, the unmaker of order, the embodiment of chaos itself. Golb is perhaps the most chilling and mysterious figure in the mythos of Ooo. He does not speak, does not reason, and yet his presence changes everything. He is the void beneath creation, the opposite of Prismo's benevolent dreaming. Where Prismo represents imagination and potential, Galb stands for entropy, the inevitable unraveling of all stories. In mythic structure, he is the primordial darkness, the chaos that must exist so that meaning can form against it. Together, these beings form what might be called the cosmic court, a silent assembly of forces that shape and sustain the world, not through direct command, but through balance. Each one exists because of the others. Prismo dreams, death reclaims, the owl observes, and Galb consumes. Creation, decay, perception, and void for eternal steps in the cycle of existence. The mortals of Ooo rarely understand this pattern, but they live within its rhythm nonetheless. What's remarkable is how Adventure Time presents these gods not as distant, perfect beings, but as familiar, flawed personalities. They nap, they joke, they get lonely. Their power doesn't make them immune to the same feelings that shape mortals. In that way, they mirror the gods of early mythologies, the Greek pantheon, the Norse Aesir, the trickster spirits of older cultures. These were never untouchable entities. They were reflections of human emotion, magnified across eternity. And that's precisely what makes the cosmic court of Ooo feel so intimate. Their presence shapes the story even when unseen. When Finn wrestles with destiny, or when Jake dreams of impossible places, these beings hover quietly in the background. They aren't puppeteers, but participants. The universe of Adventure Time feels alive because its gods are not separate from it, they are it, dispersed through every glowing star, every echo of laughter, every fading dream. When you think about it, the gods and monsters of Ooo aren't that different from each other. The line between them is porous, shifting, like the tides that once washed away the old world. Many of Oo's so-called monsters were once divine, or perhaps still are in a forgotten way. They carry the echoes of creation within them, though it has grown twisted or dim with time. The show rarely paints them as evil outright. Instead, it lets their tragedy show through, as if they are remnants of something greater, fallen pieces of a forgotten heaven. Take Orgalorg, for example, the entity who hides within the guise of Gunther the Penguin. Once a cosmic destroyer, a being so vast and terrible that even the stars feared her, Orgalorg was cast down and reduced to something small and comic. But that fall doesn't erase her divinity. It reframes it. Like Lucifer, Prometheus, or other fallen beings of myth, she embodies the price of hubris and the tenderness of exile. To watch her waddle at Ice King's feet, squawking and absurd, is to witness a myth rewritten in miniature. The universe, it seems, has a sense of humor even about its gods. Then there's the Lich, whose presence burns like a wound across the mythic body of Ooo. If Gulb is chaos itself, then the Lich is its echo, a creature born from the old world's apocalypse, forever whispering of extinction. The Lich speaks in tones of inevitability, a voice that cuts through time with chilling certainty. He is death without compassion, ending without renewal. Yet even he plays a necessary role in the mythic structure. In ancient folklore, such beings often serve as cosmic reminders they exist, to remind creation of its fragility, to test its will to continue. The Lich is not just the destroyer. He is the shadow cast by life's persistence. Without him, the light of Oo's rebirth would lose its meaning. What's so haunting about Adventure Time's cosmology is that it doesn't draw a clean moral line between its gods and its monsters. Prismo and Death and the Cosmic Owl are not good in the traditional sense, just as the Lich and Gulb aren't purely evil. They represent processes, not personalities. They are the breathing mechanisms of the universe: dream, decay, order, and dissolution. Even the Candy Kingdom, ruled by Princess Bubblegum, echoes this divine structure on a smaller scale. She creates life in her image, governs it with logic and care, yet often slips into the role of a god too obsessed with control. Her people worship her unknowingly, and she bears the same loneliness that afflicts Prismo or Death. In that way, she stands as a mortal reflection of the divine, carrying both compassion and arrogance in equal measure. If you trace these patterns closely, Ooo begins to resemble an ancient mythic hierarchy, not one dictated by power but by function. At the base are mortals who dream and forget. Above them are the shapeshifters, witches, and magical beings, those who blur the line between human and divine. Above those are the cosmic entities, who weave the rules that shape reality. But even beyond them lies something still greater, the unknowable, the blank space that even gods fear to enter. In that emptiness, perhaps, Gulb stirs, or perhaps it is something even deeper, the pure sleeping consciousness of the universe, from which everything gods, monsters, mortals is born. The beauty of adventure. Time's mythos is that it treats this unknowable not as a threat, but as something sacred. The show never tries to explain everything. It allows mystery to live. It allows silence to speak. The restraint is what makes the cosmic elements of Ooo feel so ancient, as if they were borrowed from the earliest campfire stories ever told. Myths, after all, were never meant to answer questions. They were meant to hold them. And Adventure Time holds them gently, like a dream you don't want to wake from too quickly. Every time Finn encounters one of these cosmic beings, whether it's Prismo offering a wish or Death waiting with quiet eyes, we see the old ritual of myth repeating itself. The mortal meets the divine, not to gain power, but to learn humility. And every time, Finn walks away, changed, more aware of the fragile beauty of his own small life. That's the essence of the hero's myth across time, the meeting of the human and the infinite, where understanding blooms not from conquest, but from awe. And so in this grand mythic tapestry, Ooo becomes a mirror for our own universe. The gods above, the monsters below, and the mortals between them, all playing their part in a cycle without beginning or end. There is no final battle between good and evil, only the eternal conversation between creation and dissolution. It's a quiet truth that hums beneath every episode, every song, every moment of stillness in Adventure Time. The gods watch, the monsters stir, and the dream continues. In that quiet balance between gods and monsters lies the soul of Adventure Time's mythology. The cosmic court isn't a place of judgment or worship, but a kind of council where reality itself contemplates its own reflection. Each being within it serves as a different face of existence, and together they create the strange harmony that keeps Ooo alive. There's something deeply serene about this arrangement, as if even chaos knows its place in the grand design. Think about how these cosmic forces interact with the mortal world. They don't descend in thunder or glory. They appear softly, almost accidentally, blending into the flow of life. Prismo speaks through the glow of his time room. The cosmic owl whispers from behind the curtain of dreams. Gold manifests in silence, devouring meaning itself. These aren't the grand gestures of traditional gods. They are echoes, ripples in the still water of existence. It gives Oo's universe a feeling of depth that stretches beyond the screen, like an old story told in the language of dream. When Finn and Jake enter these divine realms, they never quite understand them. But that misunderstanding is what makes their encounters beautiful. Prismo's wishes, for example, aren't simple rewards. They're lessons in consequence. The first time Finn interacts with him, the wish spirals into tragedy, a reminder that even divine gifts carry the burden of choice. And when Finn later returns, older and wiser, he no longer asks for what he wants, but for what he understands. That evolution from desire to awareness mirrors the way mortals in myth grow through their contact with gods. There's a profound gentleness in how Adventure Time handles that theme. It doesn't present the divine as something to fear, but something to listen to. The universe speaks softly in this world, and only those who slow down enough to hear it can truly understand. Jake hears it in his dreams. Marceline feels it in her music. Bubblegum senses it in the quiet hum of her laboratory. The divine presence flows through everything, not as a command, but as an invitation. And then, of course, there is Golb, the quiet contradiction that defines the edges of the myth. Where Prismo represents the dreaming act of creation, Golb represents the dream's collapse. He is the end of language, the silence after the song. In many ancient traditions, this figure appears under different names: Typhon, Apophis the Void, chaos itself. Yet Golb is not pure evil. His destruction has a strange kind of mercy. He erases form, dissolves meaning, and in doing so returns everything to the stillness from which it came. The fact that even he is not defeated but transformed at the end of the series, when Betty merges with him, tells us everything about the moral tone of this mythos. There is no victory or defeat, only change. Betty's choice to become one with Golb in order to save Simon is one of the most mythic acts in the show. It's a sacrifice on the scale of Persephone's descent or Isis's devotion, the mortal embracing the divine darkness. Not to destroy it, but to soften it with love. Through her, the show suggests that even chaos can be touched by compassion. The universe, vast and strange as it is, still bends toward connection. In that moment, Golb ceases to be merely the devourer. He becomes a part of the cycle of grace, the final piece of balance between all things. Death leads to rest. Rest leads to dream. Dream leads to life. and chaos leads back to quiet. That's the full circle of Oo's mythic cosmology, and it's breathtakingly calm once you see it. There's no need for eternal conflict. Even the gods seem to understand this, watching over the endless transformations with something like peace. In this sense, Adventure Time's gods are less about power and more about perspective. They remind us that everything, even apocalypse, is temporary. Prismo's laughter, death's stillness, the cosmic owl's gaze, Galb's silence, each one tells the same truth in a different tongue. That existence is a story told over and over again, in countless forms, with no true beginning or end. The gods do not rule the world. They remember it. They dream it into being with every thought, every moment of awareness. And within that dream, mortals like Finn and Jake wander, living out their stories, never realizing that they too are part of the same cosmic court. Every choice they make, every act of love or courage, ripples outward into the divine layers of the universe. The gods, after all, were once mortals too, or perhaps mortals are simply gods who have forgotten what they are. The line is thin, softer than sleep. That idea that mortals and gods exist on the same continuum is what gives Adventure Time its mythic tenderness. There is no hierarchy, only intimacy. The stars above are not distant rulers, they are family. Every being, from the tiniest candy person to the vast shape of Golb, belongs to the same infinite story. And that, perhaps, is the greatest comfort of all, that nothing in Ooo, no matter how strange or small, is ever truly alone. If we look at Oo's cosmic court as an ancient pantheon, it begins to reveal an extraordinary harmony beneath its chaos, a mythic logic that feels older than time itself. Each divine or monstrous being, from Prismo's warmth to Golb's science, fulfills a sacred role in maintaining equilibrium. The gods of Ooo are not in opposition, but in conversation. They are parts of a single consciousness, dreaming endlessly through creation and decay. The entire universe becomes a myth in motion, retelling itself through laughter, sorrow, and rebirth. When you watch Adventure Time through that lens, it starts to resemble the great cosmologies of human myth, the ones whispered by firelight, the ones that tried to explain why the stars burn and the oceans sleep. The Land of Ooo is a post-apocalyptic world, yes, but it's also a reborn cosmos, the world after the flood, after Ragnarok, after the Great Forgetting. It's the moment when creation starts over, using the ruins of the old world as its bones, and like every mythic dawn, gods and monsters rise again, carrying the same eternal questions. What does it mean to exist? What remains after everything ends? In that sense, Oo's pantheon feels like a reflection of our own search for meaning. Prismo's gentle omniscience embodies our longing to control destiny. Death's quiet patience mirrors our fear of endings. Galb's incomprehensible presence is the shape of our unanswerable questions. And the cosmic owl, drifting silently between all things, represents our intuition, that soft voice that says, there's something more than what we can see. Each god, then, is not just a being, but a part of the collective soul of existence. Even the smaller cosmic entities, like the ancient psychic tandem war elephant, or the elemental forces, carry mythic resonance. They are the echoes of primordial creation, beings that once shaped the universe before retreating into silence. The elementals, for instance, are fragments of the original order, representing fire, ice, candy, and slime, each both divine and flawed. Their existence parallels the classical elements of mythic philosophy, from the Greek Stoicheia to the Buddhist Mahabhuta. And yet, Adventure Time gives them emotion, personality, and vulnerability. They are gods who cry, gods who change, gods who forget, who they were. This vulnerability is what makes the show's mythology so comforting. In Ooo, even the gods are allowed to be uncertain. They doubt, they falter, they grow. There's something deeply human in that. The cosmic court isn't a hierarchy to be feared. It's a family of flawed immortals, bound together by the same longing that shapes every mortal heart. They are what we might become if we had eternity to think about what it means to be alive. And perhaps that's the quiet message hidden in Adventure Time stars, that godhood isn't about perfection, but about awareness. The divine in this universe isn't something beyond reach. It's something we drift into every time we dream, every time we love, every time we laugh without knowing why. The gods and monsters of Ooo are mirrors, reflecting all the ways being alive can feel, from joy to dread, from peace to confusion. The mythos doesn't separate the sacred from the strange. It holds them both gently, as parts of the same sleeping cosmos. When the heroes of Ooo die, they don't disappear into heaven or hell. They return to this quiet balance, to the dream of existence itself. We see this in Finn and Jake's reunion after death, in the way their spirits move effortlessly between worlds. It's not reward or punishment. It's continuation. A soft, cyclical renewal that mirrors how the universe breathes. Even the gods abide by that same law. Prismo dies and returns through the dreamer. Betty and Gull become one and are reborn as something unspoken. Death, too, one day yields his role to his own son. Nothing stays still, not even eternity. And that is the essence of Oo's mythology. Movement, transformation, and grace. Every being, from the smallest candy creature to the grandest cosmic deity, participates in that flow. The universe isn't ruled by power, but by rhythm, the rhythm of endless becoming. When we see the stars above Ooo, twinkling faintly over the quiet hills, we're not just looking at distant suns. We're looking at the sleeping faces of gods, of stories, of possibilities that never end. In this mythic structure, Adventure Time becomes more than a story about friendship or adventure. It becomes a bedtime myth about existence itself, about how every end gives way to another beginning, and every silence hides a heartbeat. The cosmic court isn't distant from us, it's within us. We are its dreamers, its wanderers, its temporary shapes. And as we drift further into this world of sleeping gods and gentle monsters, one truth becomes clear. Ooo is not a place that was destroyed and rebuilt. It's a place that is always rebuilding in every moment, through every soul. The gods, the mortals, the tricksters, and the fools, all are threads in the same eternal tapestry, woven together by the quiet hands of time itself. In every myth across history, the feminine has been the pulse of creation, not merely as mother or maiden, but as the living rhythm that keeps time moving forward. In Ooo, this energy flows through everything, shaping the world's rebirth after the Great Mushroom War, whispering in its forests, crystallizing in its ice, glowing in its candy. In the mythology of Adventure Time, the feminine divine doesn't appear as a single goddess sitting on a throne above the world. Instead, she exists everywhere, fragmented, refracted, and reborn through countless forms. Princess Bubblegum, Marceline, Flame Princess, the Slime Princess, even the elemental forces themselves, they are each different faces of a vast, cosmic, feminine principle. They are creation and destruction, emotion and intellect, science and instinct, weaving in and out of balance like the tides. Let's begin with the Princess Bubblegum, a character who, on the surface, seems defined by intellect and structure. She's a builder of kingdoms, a scientist, a ruler who tries to contain chaos through reason. But beneath that, she embodies the archetype of the creator goddess, a figure found in countless myths. In Egyptian lore, she would be like Isis, restoring the broken pieces of the world with love and ingenuity. In Greek mythology, she might mirror Athena, born from thought and strategy, guiding civilization through wisdom. Yet Bubblegum's myth is deeply modern and deeply human. Her rule is not divine perfection, but fragile balance. Her creations can crumble. Her moral compass can waver. And that imperfection is what makes her sacred. She represents the intellect of creation, the part of the divine that thinks the world into being. When she shapes candy citizens or constructs entire ecosystems, she's performing a kind of mythic act, crafting life from sweetness and chemistry, from heart and mind intertwined. The Candy Kingdom isn't just a political state, it's a symbol of creation born from care, of civilization made tender. But as with every mythic mother figure, her love can become possessive. Her protection can turn to control. And in that tension, Adventure Time quietly asks a timeless question. Can creation ever exist without the fear of losing what's been created? Opposite her stands Marceline, the dark goddess of emotion, decay, and memory. If Bubblegum is the builder, Marceline is the witness. She is music, mourning, and longing. She carries the weight of time, a vampire whose immortality feels less like power and more like burden. In the mythology of Ooo, she is the goddess of cycles of endings that birth new beginnings. In ancient myth, she'd stand beside figures like Persephone, Hecate, or Kali, those who walk through shadow not to destroy but to renew. Her songs are hymns of memory, keeping the past alive so it can teach the present how to feel. Marceline's power lies in transformation. She doesn't deny the world's decay, she sings through it, softens it, redefines it. The fact that she and Bubblegum's bond becomes one of the show's emotional centers is not just romance, it's cosmology. Together, they complete a mythic circle. Bubblegum builds, Marceline remembers. One gives structure, the other gives meaning. They mirror the two halves of the cosmic feminine creation and reflection, and through their unity, the world of Ooo becomes whole again. And then there's Flame Princess, the embodiment of raw passion, destruction, and rebirth. She represents the fiery aspect of the feminine divine, the one that burns away illusion so something truer can rise from the ashes. Her temper, her struggle for self-control, her isolation all echo the myths of fire goddesses like Pele, Brigid, or Amaterasu. In her, we see the purifying flame, the sacred anger that transforms, the emotional honesty that terrifies yet heals. When she learns to balance her fire, she becomes a force of renewal, a living metaphor for emotional evolution. Each of these feminine figures is a phase of a greater cycle, the cycle of birth, decay, and rebirth that defines not just Ooo, but the human condition itself. They are goddesses who live, love, and err within the ruins of a fallen world. And through them, Adventure Time tells us that the divine is not somewhere above the apocalypse. It's growing through it. Every act of rebuilding, every moment of tenderness, every flicker of forgiveness, those are sacred renewals, little echoes of creation itself. Even the elementals fire, ice, candy, and slime are mythic embodiments of this cyclical feminine principle. Each represents a primal emotion that sustains the world: passion, memory, sweetness, and adaptability. Together they mirror the four classical elements of old myths, yet Adventure Time infuses them with personality, story, and heart. They are not static forces, but living cycles, constantly evolving, fighting, merging, dissolving, returning. In their union and separation, we see the universe's endless renewal. And perhaps that's what makes the mythos of Ooo feel so eternal. Beneath the whimsy and candy-colored chaos lies a quiet truth. The world is always ending and always beginning again. The feminine divine, whether in the form of a scientist queen, a vampire bard, or a goddess of fire, is the pulse that keeps that cycle turning. It's the heartbeat beneath the ruins, the warmth that persists after every winter. When we look closer at the elemental balance of Ooo, it becomes clear that these forces, candy, fire, ice, and slime, aren't just random magical energies. They're the bones and breath of a living world, each ruled or represented by a woman who embodies its spiritual nature. Princess Bubblegum stands for candy, the sweetness of creation, the glue of community, the instinct to nurture and protect. Flame Princess represents fire, intensity, truth, and the painful purification that comes with transformation. The ice elemental, first embodied in patient St. Pim, and later mirrored by the Ice King, is the force of memory, of stillness, and the slow freezing of time. And finally, the slime elemental, a goddess of flexibility and flow, speaks to adaptability, the eternal yielding that ensures survival. Each of these beings expresses a facet of what ancient myth might have called the World Mother, a spirit that renews itself through change. In old mythologies, this might have been a single goddess, like Gaia or Shakti, whose essence split into the elements of existence. In Adventure Time, however, Pendleton Ward and his team refract that essence into multiple living stories. It's as if the divine mother of the world was shattered in the Great Mushroom War, and her fragments became the new life forms of Ooo. They are separate, yet connected, each a dream of balance, trying to find its way back to harmony. And that harmony is never perfect. The Candy Kingdom, for instance, may seem idyllic, its citizens smiling, its streets bright with confectionery colors, but beneath the surface lies tension, hierarchy, and fear. Princess Bubblegum's control over her subjects, her impulse to engineer perfection, reveals how creation can become possessive. She loves her people deeply, but she also cannot let them stray from the order she's built. Her story becomes a meditation on the dangers of loving too much, of shaping the world so tightly that it forgets how to breathe. By contrast, the Slime Kingdom moves freely without rigidity or permanence. Its people change shape, merge, divide, and flow. It's messy, unstructured, but peaceful. It represents a kind of divine letting go and acceptance of impermanence. Within that gooey chaos lies a wisdom that Bubblegum, for all her brilliance, sometimes struggles to grasp. In the mythology of Ooo, these two kingdoms reflect the opposing halves of creative energy, the urge to build and the wisdom to let things dissolve. The Fire Kingdom stands apart, a realm of heat and volatility. Flame Princess's journey is one of self-discovery through destruction. As a child of chaos, her anger once seemed dangerous, even catastrophic. But over time, she learns that fire doesn't only burn, it illuminates. Her evolution mirrors ancient rites of purification, where fire consumes what's dead so that life can begin anew. Her flames are truth itself, painful, necessary, and cleansing. And like the phoenix of myth, she reminds us that every ending is a preparation for rebirth. Then, in the farthest cold of Ooo, there is the legacy of the ice elemental. The frozen realm speaks not of death, but of memory. Ice preserves it, keeps the past intact, waiting for the warmth of rediscovery. Patience. St. Pim, the original ice elemental, embodies that stillness. Her power is restraint. Her curse is isolation. And in Simon Pitkikov, we see how that divine frost can overtake the heart. He carries the tragic echo of divine memory, turned human, a being meant to preserve knowledge and beauty, but consumed by loneliness and madness. Through these stories, Adventure Time weaves a pattern older than language, a cycle of creation, preservation, decay, and rebirth, all guided by the feminine forces that keep the world in motion. They do not simply rule. They feel, falter, and evolve. In their conflicts and reconciliations, they embody the emotional truth of the cosmos itself, that life is made of tension, and balance is found only through understanding those tensions deeply. What makes the mythology of Ooo so quietly powerful is how it portrays divinity as something tenderly human. None of these goddesses are perfect. They all carry wounds, regrets, and mistakes. But that vulnerability is not a flaw, it's the essence of renewal. To feel pain, to long for change, to question oneself, those are the sparks that keep the cycle alive. Even in their failures, they become symbols of hope. Because if even the divine can falter and still continue, then perhaps the world can too. Marceline's loneliness, Bubblegum's control, Flame Princess's fury, the Ice Elemental's grief, these are not separate myths. They are stages of the same eternal story, the world breaking and healing again and again. Each time, the divine learns a little more about love, about impermanence, about what it means to create. And maybe that's why the Land of Ooo never feels still. It's always in the middle of becoming. Every character, every kingdom, every strange little creature is caught in that rhythm creation, destruction, and rebirth humming softly beneath the candy skies. When we trace this rhythm through the relationships between these divine figures, we begin to see that the myth of Ooo isn't about conflict so much as harmony rediscovered through struggle. The cycles of renewal are emotional, personal, and cosmic all at once. Marceline and Bubblegum's story is the clearest reflection of this pattern, a tale of two goddesses who mirror creation and memory, intellect and emotion, logic and passion. For centuries, myth has paired such forces together, the sun and moon, night and dawn, life and death, because the cosmos itself is built on duality. In Ooo, that duality becomes deeply intimate. Marceline's darkness doesn't destroy Bubblegum's light, it reveals it. And Bubblegum's structure doesn't suppress Marceline's freedom, it gives it a home. Their connection becomes a kind of mythic reconciliation, a living example of what ancient storytellers might have called hieros gamos, the sacred union of opposites. In that balance, the world breathes again. What makes this bond especially meaningful is how Adventure Time allows it to unfold quietly, over years, like a natural process of healing. It's not framed as triumph or spectacle. It's simply love finding its way back through time. That gentle inevitability makes it mythic in its own way. Just as Persephone returns to the surface each spring, or the Hindu goddess Parvati reunites with Shiva after separation, Bubblegum and Marceline's reunion represents the renewal of harmony between creation and reflection. They are not just lovers in the story of Ooo, they are the story of Ooo in miniature. But the feminine myth doesn't stop there. Every corner of Ooo carries echoes of her presence, often in forgotten forms. The forests whisper with dryad-like energies, the oceans hum with mermaid spirits, and even the clouds seem to hold the watchful eyes of unseen caretakers. This is one of Adventure Time's quietest truths. The sacred feminine is not limited to characters with names and crowns. It's in the atmosphere itself, in every act of kindness, every song, every small rebirth. Take the recurring theme of caregiving, the way Tree Trunks tends to her orchard, the way the young elemental Flame Princess learns patience through empathy, even the way Lumpy Space Princess, loud and self-centered as she may seem, represents the messy honesty of emotion. Each of them carries a shard of the Divine Mother nurturing in their own imperfect ways, teaching the world that tenderness is a form of strength. This softness, this undercurrent of care, is what keeps the world of Ooo from collapsing under its absurdity. It's easy to imagine that a post-apocalyptic landscape rebuilt by candy and dreams might be filled only with chaos. Yet again and again, we see compassion growing in unlikely places. That compassion is the divine pulse, what myths once called the sacred breath, the anime mundi, the soul of the world. It binds everything together, not with force, but with care. And that brings us to the deeper layer of the myth, the cycle of emotional renewal. Every goddess-like figure in Ooo must confront her own shadow before she can bring balance to the world. Bubblegum learns humility through failure. Marceline finds peace through forgiveness. Flame Princess finds truth through anger. Even Patience, the ice elemental, must learn to let go of stillness so that life can move again. Their personal growth isn't separate from the cosmic order, it is the cosmic order. Ancient stories often spoke of goddesses whose emotions shaped the seasons. When Demeter wept, the world withered. When she rejoiced, spring returned. In Ooo, the same principle exists on a subtler level. When the feminine divine heals, the world brightens. When she breaks, the world trembles. This quiet mirroring between inner and outer worlds gives Adventure Time its hypnotic beauty. Every tear, every song, every reunion, it all carries mythic weight. Marceline's music, especially, feels like a ritual act. Her songs are prayers in disguise, each note softening the edges of time. When she plays her bass beneath the stars, she's doing what mythic bards have done for millennia, turning emotion into continuity, keeping the universe from forgetting itself. And when Princess Bubblegum listens, when she finally understands that logic alone cannot save the world, it's as though the universe exhales. Harmony, for a moment, is restored. And that's the heart of the feminine myth in Ooo, renewal through understanding. The world doesn't need to be rebuilt through battle or conquest. It needs to be felt, seen, and loved even in its imperfections. The divine feminine in Adventure Time teaches that redemption isn't about undoing mistakes, but transforming through them. The Candy Kingdom may crumble, the ice may melt, the fire may rage, but each ending is an offering, each loss a seed. The myth of Ooo, through its goddesses and elemental queens, reminds us that all creation begins again from tenderness. Even in a land born of ruin, sweetness grows, and in that sweetness, something eternal stirs the same pulse that ancient storytellers called the breath of the world, and we might now simply call hope. As we reach the quieter end of this reflection, it becomes clear that the feminine divine in Adventure Time is not only about the forces that shape the world, but also about the ways the world heals itself through connection. Every goddess, every queen, every elemental spirit carries a fragment of something much older. The truth that love, in all its forms, is the act that keeps existence from unraveling. We see this most vividly in moments of vulnerability. When Princess Bubblegum, for all her intelligence and control, finally admits her fears, she becomes more than a ruler, she becomes human. Her voice softens, her perfection fades, and in that fragility, we see the goddess step down from her pedestal to sit beside her creation. It's a moment mirrored in countless myths, when a deity sheds their divinity to walk among mortals. In Ooo, that gesture feels like forgiveness, not from God to human, but from the world to itself. Marceline, too, carries this humility. Though she could stand apart above the world, she instead immerses herself in it. She lives among mortals, befriends them, loves them, and loses them. She lets time wound her. That willingness to feel is her sacred offering. Ancient myths often spoke of gods who envied human pain, who longed to know the fullness of emotion, even if it meant suffering. Marceline fulfills that longing. Through her, the myth becomes intimate. She doesn't reign, she remembers. And in remembering, She keeps the divine close to the human heart. Even Flame Princess, who begins her journey engulfed in rage, learns to turn her fire inward to forge herself rather than destroy. Her evolution is almost alchemical. She burns through layers of ego and hurt until only truth remains. When she rules her kingdom with fairness and warmth, it's as if the phoenix has finally landed, wings folded, ready to tend the embers instead of feeding the blaze. Her arc reminds us that anger, when understood, becomes illumination. The goddess of fire does not just teach destruction, she teaches transformation. If we take a step back and see these stories as one great cycle, we notice that the feminine divine in Ooo isn't static or singular. She changes faces, voices, and colors. She is candy and flame, slime and frost, laughter and sorrow. But through every transformation, her essence remains the same. She gives form to chaos and meaning to time. When the masculine archetypes, the heroes, the kings, the tricksters, wander and search, she is the ground beneath their feet, the thread that ties their stories to something eternal. That's what makes the mythos of Adventure Time feel so ancient despite its modern shell. It doesn't tell a tale of gods ruling from above. It shows divinity living within the ruins, finding new shapes in the aftermath. It's a story where the goddess is not unreachable, but constantly reborn in a scientist's lab, in a musician's song, in a flicker of firelight. Ooo is her temple, and every act of kindness or creation is a prayer whispered into its colorful air. The show's tone, playful yet contemplative, mirrors this divine paradox. Humor becomes a sacred act of survival. Softness becomes power. Even absurdity has purpose. It's as if the myth itself refuses to be solemn for too long, reminding us that the laughter, too, is holy. This blending of tones, where the cosmic and the silly coexist, is perhaps the purest form of the feminine divine. The ability to hold contradictions, to nurture chaos without erasing it. And so when we watch these characters, Bubblegum building her kingdom again and again, Marceline strumming songs of love and loss, Flame Princess ruling with calm fire, and even the Slime Princess, swaying gently through uncertainty, we're watching myth in motion. The divine feminine isn't a statue or a symbol. She's a process, a rhythm that carries the world forward. She doesn't promise eternity. She promises renewal. In that sense, Adventure Time offers one of the most quietly profound reinterpretations of divine mythology in modern storytelling. It takes the fragments of ancient archetypes, the creator, the mourner, the destroyer, the dreamer, and scatters them across a world that feels both ancient and newborn. The result is a universe that constantly heals itself through its feminine energy, not by erasing the scars of apocalypse, but by transforming them into art, laughter, and love. And maybe that's the true lesson of Oo's goddesses, that healing isn't a single event, but an endless act, a garden that needs tending, a kingdom that must be rebuilt, a song that must be sung again. Every time the world falters, the feminine divine breathes life into it once more. Every time love fades, it finds a new vessel. Every time hope wavers, it returns in a different form, glowing softly, like moonlight reflected on candy glass. Through all her faces, she whispers the same lullaby to Ooo and to us. That creation never truly ends, that love never truly dies, and that even after the quietest apocalypse, something gentle always begins to grow again. Tonight, as we reach the final stretch of this long, dreamy journey through the myth of Ooo, we'll step softly into something a little more elusive, something that lives between dream and memory, between story and silence. This is the dream of myth, memory, time, and meaning. If the Land of Ooo is the body of this great myth, and its gods and heroes are its beating heart, then time strange, shifting, circular time is its dreaming mind. Because in Adventure Time, the story doesn't move in a straight line. It folds, spirals, returns, and begins again. It feels like a dream we've had before, but can't quite remember. Every adventure, every goodbye, every strange creature that fades into the distance, it's all part of something that feels eternal. The show itself treats memory not as an archive, but as a living sea. Things sink beneath it, but they never truly vanish. They drift, waiting to surface again. That's what gives Adventure Time its haunting gentleness. It's not a world obsessed with finality. It's a world that remembers even when it hurts. Every broken kingdom, every lonely character, every small act of kindness becomes a thread in the dream tapestry of Ooo. When we look at the mythic structure of this world, we begin to notice that time itself behaves like a storyteller. It pauses, revisits, reshapes. The show's episodes often skip across centuries. Dream sequences blend with memories, and the future echoes the past in ways that feel more poetic than chronological. Finn is reborn. Jake's soul echoes beyond lifetime, and the faces of ancient beings reappear in new forms. The world turns, but it never leaves its own orbit. It's the mythic cycle of rebirth, the same one told in the Vedic concept of samsara, the endless loop of existence, or in Norse myth, where the world ends in fire only to bloom again. But Adventure Time offers a quieter version of this cycle. It doesn't treat repetition as punishment. It treats it as grace, the idea that every ending is a rehearsal for a new beginning, and every memory is simply a story waiting to be retold. This becomes especially clear when we think of Prismo, the dream being who lives in an eternal moment. His realm, suspended in pink light, exists outside linear time, a perfect metaphor for the way Adventure Time itself feels. He watches over infinite timelines, all possibilities happening at once, like pages of a story being read in no particular order. Prismo is the myth's dreamer, the storyteller who never wakes, reminding us that maybe the universe itself is just a dream that loves being told. And if Prismo is the dreamer, then Finn and Jake are the dream's wanderers, the figures through which the dream learns about itself. They travel through memory, through worlds that seem both ancient and unborn, through futures that resemble forgotten pasts. Their friendship anchors them, but even that bond isn't immune to time's flow. It stretches, transforms, reincarnates. By the time we reach the series' end and beyond, in the distant future glimpses of Shermie and Beth, we realize the myth has begun again, not as a copy, but as an echo. In mythic terms, this is what Messiah Eliade once called the eternal return, the idea that the world renews itself through repetition, that history is less important than rhythm. In Ooo, everything pulses to that rhythm. The heroes change faces, the gods take new forms, and yet the dream continues. It's a cycle without despair because it's also a promise that no story is ever truly lost, no song ever forgotten. The way memory operates in Adventure Time mirrors the way dreams work, fragments blending together, emotions taking shape as landscapes. Marceline's memories of Simon blur into songs. Bubblegum's regrets crystallize into her kingdom's structure. Finn's dreams of being other beings like the cosmic butterfly or a shoko. His past self dissolved the barrier between who he is and who he was. Memory becomes reincarnation, and reincarnation becomes storytelling. This approach to time gives the myth of Ooo its tenderness. It's not a world racing toward a grand finale. It's a world gently circling its own heartbeat. The past and future touch constantly, like ripples in still water. We might see the shadow of the Great Mushroom War in one episode, and then witness the birth of something entirely new in another, but there's never a sense that one cancels the other out. The old world and the new coexist, folded together like pages of a dream journal. In a way, that's what makes Adventure Time so comforting. Even in its sadness, it carries the quiet assurance that everything belongs, even the broken parts, even the forgotten. Time in Ooo is not a straight road toward loss. It's a loop of rediscovery. And in that loop, every character, every emotion, every small act of kindness becomes immortal. When you really think about it, Adventure Time doesn't just tell stories about heroes and villains. It tells stories about stories themselves. It asks what happens to myths when they are remembered, and what happens to the world when myths are forgotten. The Land of Ooo is built from layers of memory, human memory, divine memory, even the memory of the earth itself. Its ruins are not just physical remnants of the old world. They are the dreams of a civilization that once was, still whispering through cracked glass and melted metal. Every myth in Ooo is like a dream within a dream, reflecting the way human culture holds on to meaning. Think about Simon Petrikov, the Ice King. He's not just a tragic figure, he's a vessel of mythic memory. The crown is his curse, but it's also a relic of an ancient story, a fragment of power that carries the echo of gods and magic from before the Mushroom War. Through him, the myth of Ooo remembers its own origin. And through his eventual redemption, through Marceline's love and memory, the dream of the world becomes a story of healing, not just survival. The same is true for Princess Bubblegum. Her existence, built from the residue of candy and science, is both an evolution and a memory of human creation. She represents reason trying to rebuild meaning from the wreckage of myth. Her kingdom, meticulously organized, rational, yet always threatened by chaos, is the dream of control inside a universe that refuses to stay still. And still, even she cannot escape the tides of memory. Beneath her careful logic lies nostalgia, regret, and an understanding that even perfection can decay. The tension between order and chaos, creation and destruction, is what gives Adventure Time its cosmic pulse. The gods, monsters, and mortals of Ooo are constantly rebalancing those forces, like dream symbols that shift meaning every time we look at them. The Lich, for instance, is the dream of oblivion, the nightmare that every myth must face. He's not just evil, he's entropy made sentient, a whisper that says everything ends. But the beauty of Adventure Time lies in how it answers that whisper. Yes, everything ends, but not forever. Finn's story is proof of that. Each time he grows, loses, or fails, the dream changes slightly. His scars don't erase the myth, they enrich it. He's the embodiment of what happens when a hero becomes aware that he's part of a cycle, that his dreams and memories are connected to something far older and wider than himself. That's what separates him from the gods of Ooo, his ability to feel the passage of time, to carry memory like a flame. The divine may be eternal, but Finn is the one who remembers what it feels like to change. That's the secret of the dream of myth. It's not about escaping time, but about finding meaning within it. In most mythologies, gods exist beyond the flow of life. They observe, they manipulate, but they do not live as we do. In Adventure Time, that line blurs constantly. Deities like Orgolor, Prismo, or even Death himself are drawn into the messy, emotional, deeply human flow of the world. They too must remember, grieve, or change. The myth of Ooo democratizes the divine. Every being, no matter how vast, becomes part of the dream's ongoing rhythm. And this rhythm manifests most beautifully through art, through music, poetry, and memory. Marceline's songs are perhaps the purest embodiment of the show's mythic time. Her voice holds centuries of love, loss, and loneliness. When she sings, she's not merely expressing emotion. she's preserving history and sound. Her music bridges the gap between what was and what is the same way myths once did in oral cultures. Each song is a ritual, a way of remembering the dream without needing to wake from it. Even smaller characters, the ones who appear and vanish without much explanation, serve this purpose. They're fragments of dreams we only half recall, a tiny snail waving in the corner of every episode, a forgotten hero mentioned once, a relic glimpsed in the background. All these moments create a sense that Ooo is alive, dreaming itself forward through infinite retellings. This is what gives Adventure Time its surreal calm. Unlike many fantasy worlds obsessed with prophecy or destiny, Ooo embraces uncertainty. It doesn't explain everything, and that's precisely what makes it mythic. Myths aren't meant to answer all questions. They're meant to awaken our sense of wonder, to make us feel that reality is deeper than it appears. And in that sense, Ooo feels ancient. It's not a place we discover, it's a place we remember. In the end, the dream of myth in Adventure Time is less about heroes achieving glory and more about the universe learning to dream kindly. Every time a character chooses compassion over destruction, remembrance over denial, the dream stabilizes for a while. And when chaos returns, as it always does, it's welcomed as part of the pattern, not an interruption of it. Because meaning in the world of Ooo isn't something fixed or eternal. It's a living thing, born again each time someone remembers a story, hums a tune, or dreams of a friend who's gone. The myth survives not because it resists time, but because it flows with it, just like the dreamer's breath. If we listen closely to that breath, the quiet rhythm of myth and memory, we can hear how Adventure Time treats time itself as a kind of living spirit. It doesn't move in a straight line, but curls back on itself like a gentle tide washing old meanings onto new shores. The world ends, civilizations rise again, and characters reincarnate into echoes of their former selves. This is the dream's eternal heartbeat, not an apocalypse, but an endless unfolding. Consider how the story of Shermie and Beth mirrors that of Finn and Jake. It's a subtle but powerful reminder that even when individuals fade, their archetypes continue. The hero and the fool are never gone. They are simply reborn under new names, new faces, new dreams. The land changes, but the myth remains because the myth isn't trapped in time, it's woven through it. Every age dreams its own version of the same tale. And maybe that's the truest meaning of Adventure Time's mythic dream, that stories are not fixed monuments, but rivers that keep flowing through us. The memory of Ooo isn't a relic to be guarded. It's a melody to be played again and again, each time slightly different, each time reflecting what we need to believe in that moment. It's why the world feels so alive with mystery, even in its quietest corners. When Prismo appears lounging in his dimension, toying with timelines and granting wishes, he represents that fluidity perfectly. He is both dreamer and dream, existing outside of linear time, yet deeply connected to the emotions of those within it. His laughter carries the wisdom of someone who understands that every story, no matter how tragic, is part of something beautiful and eternal. He's the myth acknowledging itself aware, amused, and deeply tender toward the beings caught within it. And this self-awareness, this quiet cosmic humor, is part of what makes Adventure Time so gentle, despite its apocalyptic roots. It doesn't judge its characters for their flaws or failures. It honors them as essential threads in the larger tapestry. Each being, from the Lich to tree trunks, adds something irreplaceable to the dream. Without fear, there would be no courage. Without chaos, no creativity. Without loss, no renewal. This cyclical compassion runs through every myth worth remembering. In Greek stories, the gods punish and redeem in the same breath. In Hindu cosmology, worlds dissolve and reform endlessly, like petals opening and closing in divine rhythm. And in Ooo, this same heartbeat continues only softer, filtered through the kindness of its heroes. Destruction happens, but it always makes space for creation. Night comes, but so does dawn. Even death, that ancient figure who keeps his calm dominion, isn't portrayed as cruel or final. He's simply another keeper of balance. His presence doesn't signal an ending, but a pause in the melody. When Jake visits him, their exchange is oddly comforting, a conversation between two old friends rather than enemies. That's the essence of Adventure Time's mythology, a belief that nothing truly ends, it only changes form. Memory, too, behaves this way. We forget, then remember, then reshape what we recall. The same event can carry different meanings as we grow older, just like how the stories of Ooo feel different when revisited. What once felt silly becomes profound. What once seemed dark now feels healing. The dream adapts to meet the dreamer. And that's what gives Adventure Time its timelessness. It's not locked in a particular age. It evolves as we do. Finn's journeys across dimensions, his encounters with alternate selves, and his glimpses of lives unlived all echo the way myths shift across cultures. One story splits into many, but all share the same soul. Whether it's the Flame Princess saga, the Elemental Awakening, or the journey to the afterlife in Together Again, every chapter reflects humanity's oldest longing, to understand who we are within the grand cycle of creation and decay. And at the heart of this understanding lies compassion, the quiet acceptance that meaning isn't found in resisting time, but in walking with it. To love something even as it fades is to honor the myth's deepest truth. When Finn smiles at the end of a long journey, when Jake laughs softly at the unknown, when Bubblegum watches her kingdom change yet again, those moments tell us that the dream is safe. It will go on, reshaping itself with each new dreamer who remembers it. So when the story of Ooo drifts into silence, it's not a goodbye. It's the sound of the dream settling back into sleep, waiting to be dreamed again. Every bedtime story, every whispered theory, every rewatch is part of the ritual of remembrance. We keep the myth alive simply by caring about it. The act of remembering becomes sacred, an offering to the dream itself. Because in the end, that's what myth truly is, a memory that refuses to fade. A dream that keeps dreaming itself into being, softly, endlessly, through time and meaning alike. And maybe that's the quiet beauty of it all, the realization that Adventure Time, in its own sleepy, strange, and luminous way, is not a story about escaping the end, but about learning to love the dream as it unfolds. Every episode, every fragment of lore, feels like a breath drawn between remembering and forgetting. The world keeps changing, and yet somehow it feels familiar, as though the myth of Ooo has been whispered into the human imagination since time began. When we look at the Candy Kingdom glowing under starlight, or watch Finn and Jake resting under the shade of the tree fort, we see not just a scene from a show, but an ancient memory retold. The sweetness, the strangeness, the laughter, it all carries the pulse of something eternal. Like the myths of the Greeks or the Norse, the stories of Ooo are reflections of ourselves. They remind us that no matter how far the world falls, we keep finding ways to imagine hope. In the oldest myths, the world often ends only to begin again. The flood subsides, the phoenix rises, the wheel turns. And Adventure Time belongs to that same sacred rhythm. The Great Mushroom War might have burned the old earth to ash, but what followed was renewal, a blooming of new magic, new life, and new hearts. The myth of Ooo tells us that destruction doesn't erase meaning, it transforms it. The ruins become temples, the monsters become gods, and the children of tomorrow inherit the dream. In this way, Ooo is less a place than a feeling. The part of us that wonders, that mourns, that believes there's still light after everything. When we dream of it, we aren't escaping the world we live in. We're remembering the world we've always known. The forests of candy, the stars with faces, the oceans that hum, they're all pieces of something ancient within us, something soft and enduring that refuses to vanish. And so Adventure Time becomes a myth of healing. It gathers the broken pieces of old stories and fits them together in new ways. It asks, what if the apocalypse wasn't the end, but a chance for kindness to begin again? What if every act of love, every joke, every friendship, every small adventure was part of the universe remembering itself? Even the gods of Ooo seem to move in this gentle rhythm. They are no longer distant rulers, but dreamers caught in the same flow as everyone else. Death, life, time, Prismo. Each one bears the same quiet longing. They create, destroy, and recreate in an endless loop, watching the myth ripple through countless forms. They are caretakers of the dream, but not its masters. The dream belongs to everyone who remembers it. And when Finn's story reaches its quiet end, it isn't done finality we feel its peace. He has lived, loved, fought, fallen, and grown. He has seen the world end and begin again, within and without himself. Like all heroes, he becomes a memory carried forward, a melody hummed by the next generation. Shermie and Beth hold his story the way we hold the myths of our ancestors, not as history, but as guidance. The hero sleeps, but his dream remains. That's what makes Adventure Time such a perfect bedtime myth. It doesn't demand belief or logic. It only asks us to listen, to let the world of Ooo wash over us like a lullaby from a forgotten age. Its logic is emotional, its structure is dreamlike, and its truth is found in the spaces between words, in the gentle feeling that meaning still exists, even when nothing makes sense. It's a myth that teaches through softness. A world where monsters can be forgiven, where love outlives the apocalypse, and where even the end of time feels like a sigh instead of a scream. The dream of Ooo is the dream of kindness, the belief that every being, no matter how small or strange, has a place in the song. And when that song fades, it's only so the next one can begin. In the mythology of sleep, this is the moment where the dream settles, when the storyteller's voice becomes quiet and the listener's mind drifts into the same rhythm. The story has done its work. It has guided us to that calm space where memory and imagination merge. The Land of Ooo continues beyond the edges of the tale, still dreaming, still alive, waiting for whoever next remembers it. So as we close this chapter, remember that the myth is not gone. It lives wherever stories are told softly, wherever someone chooses wonder over fear. And maybe as you fall asleep tonight, you'll find yourself there walking those candy-coated streets, hearing the faint laughter of heroes long gone, watching the sky shimmer with ancient stars. Because the dream never really ends. It just finds new dreamers. And as long as someone remembers, the myth of Ooo will keep breathing gentle, endless, and full of light. Good night.